Welcome to another Confluence podcast. I'm Randall Stevens, and I've got Evan TRXL with me as usual. And we're happy to invite today's guest, Aaron Vorwerk from Egnyte. Welcome, Aaron.
Thanks, guys. Happy to be here on the famous Confluence podcast.
Yeah, I don't know if it's famous. It's not famous yet, but we'll see. We'll get there. Yeah, I did have a few people at AU the other day say, "Oh, I know about you all because I've listened to the podcast." So that's good. That's always nice to know. I always go into that. I think I probably told Evan this in previous. It's like I kind of do this, not assuming that nobody is going to listen. It's like it's really just mental health for us. Here.
This is our therapy session.
No, but welcome, Aaron. We're going to Aaron's with Egnyte. We're going to obviously dive into what's going on with Egnyte, specifically around AI and machine learning things. They've been around. The company's been around for a while, and they've been doing a lot on that front. So Aaron's going to fill us in. I've gotten to know Aaron's been in the AEC industry for a long time, but I really didn't meet him until just the last handful of years that I've known Aaron. And now we've been fast friends as we've, show up at all the conferences together and those things. But, Aaron's also been, how many of the Confluence events have you been to now?
So, three. I got two in Lexington and three in SoCal.
Last three. So, always love having you involved. And, Aaron's one of those I'll let him give you his full background, but AEC background, is now came out of the practice side and the channel side from the Autodesk and into a company like Egnyte, which has been investing heavily in the AEC market. It's just been, great for them to bring and build, and for Aaron to kind of be the lead on the AEC front as they've begun to build that team up. So always great conversations, Aaron. Maybe let's just start this out with you giving a little bit of more of your background and what that looks like from the AEC market perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So I see myself, or always have seen myself, as a professional first, and maybe it's just wanting to identify with practitioners, feel like I'm still part of the club. But I am an architect registered in Texas and Michigan, based in Fort Worth. I'm also a lead AP BD&C, so I focused on sustainability for a while, and I have a couple of degrees in civil and structural engineering. So I studied structural dynamics at one point. So I started out in practice with all of this, working as seems very fitting. I was working in an architecture and structural engineering firm, and I sold that company. I was a project manager, but I sold that company on BIM at a corporate retreat in 2005. And I became the BIM guy, just by apparently having the expertise, that research for that presentation. But I quickly, at that firm and then at another firm a little bit later, I learned what it meant to go through digital transformation, and I appreciated that adrenaline rush. And so that moved me into sort of the design technology part of the industry. And so for about 15 years, I was in the Autodesk ecosystem, 5 years with a partner and 10 years at Autodesk. 18 months ago, I made a kind of a significant transition because I had been so focused for so long, as a now almost 20-year Revit user and so on. I'm so focused on the design tech that I really hadn't looked sort of outside of the project. And now I lead the architecture segment here at Egnyte, where, this is a company that has traditionally come out of platform infrastructure and now going kind of big in verticals like AEC. I was the first hire to focus specifically on architecture 18 months ago. And so here we are, sort of finding our way into this space.
Great.
I remember being at a AIA large firm roundtable. I think it was in Portland for the CIO group. And I don't think you were a part of Egnyte at that point, because this was a few years ago. And Egnyte came in and gave a presentation, and they did not understand AEC at all. Right. And so to go from there to where they are now is huge. And like the things that I just learned about you, Aaron, that's a really cool story. I had no idea the background that you had. And so for you to understand the workflows that architects are going through, what they're dealing with on the client side and the collaboration side and the sharing side, and especially going through COVID and on-prem and cloud and all these things. I mean, it makes total sense now. Like, I can see how all the puzzle pieces have come together. That's really cool.
Well, we've been we've been Ignite fans here at Avail, big fans the last handful of years. We got a bunch of our customers that are using Avail. We have shared customers. And I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast, but one of the things that really made me a huge fan was we had a problem in a shared client's environment with our software working together. And without going into details, Ignite, right? The kind of company that like says, okay, let's go figure this out and get this worked out. It's usually passing the buck, but it's so refreshing. And then, after we've been working with the team and they've been continuing to invest, not only, bringing Aaron onto that team, but everybody else around that AEC part of the ecosystem, they've just been great people to work with. Just a lot of fun. So kudos, Aaron, for you to ignite, no pun intended, to ignite and to kind of lead that charge of bringing the right kind of people together that do understand this part of the industry and bringing your all solution and catering to this part of the audience. So it's just been great.
Yeah. Well, personally, it's been fun in the sense of having this experience in the industry, but not all of that is transferable, right? My Revit skills are only so valuable at a company like Ignite. However, my understanding of how Autodesk and Ignite work together has been, of course, useful. And then leading a team at Autodesk and then coming to Ignite, and there's some, some beginnings of kind of understanding of go-to-market and business development and so on that I had at Autodesk that I'm getting to now really execute, right, as the thought leader for architecture, this segment leader. So it's kind of a safe place in a way to grow because of the newness here at Ignite in going vertical, and despite being, a mature, fairly large company.
I'll kind of show I'll expose my ignorance about, things like products like Ignite or just the way to think about it. And obviously I've learned a lot over the last few years, largely with your help. But, I think myself and probably a lot of people that might be listening to this, just think about the place where all their files are, the network, whatever you call it, the drive, the place where all your files are stored as, that's what it is. It's a place to go store things. So, my very simple understanding of companies like Ignite and others in the market were, okay, it's just another, or maybe a cloud, maybe you're introducing cloud storage as part of that. But I always just thought of it as like, okay, it's the file system. But really the storage part is a commodity, and it's really these layers of software layer really on top of that is governance and all these other security and other things that are happening or can happen on top of all that data. So I'll tee that up and just say, explain to us, what is Ignite and ultimately, maybe what are the misconceptions that people have about what this is, maybe kind of clear that up.
Yeah. So you're exactly right. Like even among our customer base, I encounter this all the time where it's like, oh, we just use you for file storage. It's like, okay, but you're sort of missing the whole point, right? Our tagline on the website, so I'm looking at this just so I get this right, but unified content management, data security, compliance, and AI in one seamless turnkey cloud platform. See, the problem with Ignite is it's really
just rolls
broad.
off the tongue.
So it's like, it's hard to put it together into, the elevator pitch. But one way to look at Ignite before you go into the sort of AEC specific focus is that we started about the same time as Dropbox and Box. Before Google Drive, but we were never a free consumer tool. It was an enterprise cybersecurity first platform from the beginning, which probably hurt the adoption numbers relative to some of those other solutions, but that was not the point. The point was to do something different, and even the architecture of it was different. I use that word very hesitantly as an architect. Anyway, that's even the way it was structured is different, and sort of a file server in a cloud where the cloud was the master. In 2007, that was pretty novel, right? So, and then all of this stuff has come along since. So, to your point, it's not just about the storage. In fact, this comes up all the time in talking about like Autodesk Construction Cloud and Ignite. It's like, well, aren't you both just storing stuff, docs? And well, yeah, I mean, at the lowest level, both platforms store stuff. What if I don't care where your files are? And that leads to a whole nother level of conversation, right? So everything from collaboration, like being able to be on any device anywhere in the world. It's one global office. It's the same drive letter. It's no VPN required. Just having one global office. That's, the starting point, right? But then you get into data governance. What does that mean? Well, there's content lifecycle management. There's a deep scanning and understanding. We can get into the AI part of it later, but like being able to identify what the content is, being able to apply policies like retention, archive, and deletion to automatically detect things like redundant, obsolete, and trivial data, basically to clean up everything you've got and organize it for you. That's some of the stuff that Ignite does. Because Ignite is primarily horizontal, now has all these verticals, but primarily has been horizontal. There are hundreds of compliance protocols already built in. HIPAA, GDPR, CMMC, but hundreds. So across many sectors. Then there's link sharing, and Ignite has some of the most secure or more advanced capabilities, you might say, around link sharing in the business. And then also built-in security features for specific things like ransomware protection, snapshotting, so on, but also behavioral detection, internal and external threats. So it's just a whole lot more. And it's hard. You're at a conference, you want to, give somebody the elevator pitch in 10 words or less. It's hard to convey that. This is a smart place to run your business in the cloud.
I just want to throw it out there. Like you said 3 words. It was like obsolete. You had words for like to describe
obsolete, trivial information. Yeah.
Thank you. I need this in my life, man, because like I'm sitting in terabyte. I'm one person and I'm sitting under terabytes of data, and it's like I just don't even want to go in and like deal with it, right? Because I'm sure architects everywhere, it's just like we're constantly just saving more and more and more every year, that the amount gets even more than the last year, right? And I'm sure, Randall, you see this all the time working with all different size firms who like nobody deletes anything anymore, right? It just all goes into folders that nobody ever looks in again. And I'm just curious, like from a peace of mind point of view, like what do you tell people when they're like, well, yeah, the system is really smart about doing this by itself? And so, I could just imagine the pushback that you would get, but like, you're not touching my folders, Aaron. Like you're not.
It's actually the opposite of that in most respects, but you can see the fear in a prospect's eyes when you offer to scan the system they just told you they're doing really well, on-prem or whatever. And they know that they don't even know where the problems are because there's no way for that to be surfaced for them. So it's like, oh, well, we can do a scan for you. And, they're often shocked, even though they know it's coming, they're shocked at what is found, like, oh, you don't need to buy half the data you were thinking you were going to need or half the storage capacity you thought you would need because, it's all junk. So
I think, cool. Maybe kind of start there, which is, I don't know if you got the numbers, but I've seen you show charts about just how much the increase in information that's being produced. I think we all know it, but it's like, do you have any of those kind of stats?
So we have several thousand AEC customers. So it's a good, litmus test, I suppose, to be a snapshot of the industry. And among those, we're seeing an 8-fold increase over a 5-year period. Really big growth. And I think some of it is, it's the cloud. It's basically free, right? But I was speaking at a conference at FutureBuild in London earlier this year, and someone asked me the questions around, is AI sustainable? Is the cloud sustainable? Big questions, like they deserve, a podcast of their own, right? But the cloud, well, AI for play, first of all, is not sustainable. We can come back to, AI with a plan is a different answer. But the cloud itself, it's like, well, it is not sustainable to say just because I should, or will store everything forever, right? That is obviously not sustainable. You're heating something up somewhere by making that decision. Whereas, yes, having kind of a life cycle for all content, not just project related content, which has a more obvious and defined life cycle, but for all content, there should be some sort of life cycle in mind.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that I don't like to get rid of things.
hugging the.
Well, just physical things. So, what I found, my therapy is I don't take things like simple example. I go to these trade shows and everybody's trying to give you this or that or the other. And I'm just like,
Totally.
it makes me very nervous to cause then I feel guilty about
Collect
throwing it away.
more
Right. So I
things.
tend to, but in the digital world, I don't think that we have that same angst that maybe we do in the physical world. So it's like, one of the observations that I've seen with customers over the last few years, of AVAIL is, they use lots of different tools and they're creating new things all the time, right? In the quest to solve problems, I always question sometimes, are you actually compounding the problem because you're actually creating a new piece of information or something else? You're trying to solve this one thing, and instead of maybe getting to the root of the problem, you're putting Band-Aids on it. You create another piece of information or spit out more info just because you could. It's man, it's just piling up information piling up.
And while you have to give some space to learn, obviously there's going to be some waste on the front end. The choice to say, I'm not going to archive anything for 10 years because it's hard, that's a different choice that can be helped through automation that, someone is just avoiding dealing with.
So maybe use this as kind of a segue. When you talk about AI and machine learning, I think a lot of what you all, well, I won't put words in your mouth, but this ability at scale across content, when you talk about policies and things like that you all put in place, it's about seeing information and understanding that information and then making decisions, kind of rules about what to do with the files and or this stuff on the network. Maybe you can kind of explain a little bit more about what you mean by all that.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, there are great folks. You've had Mehdi, I think, and Sam maybe on this podcast before that are helping folks understand, how they should plan for AI, how they should implement or strategize AI across their firms. And most of the time, I think it's even using their words, they're talking about augmentation and automation, right? They're talking about the ideation tool, the play, the, idea generation and the sort of augmentation. And then of course, removing all the tedious and menial, whatever tasks from their workflows through automation. What nobody seems to think about, and what I hadn't really processed until I came to Egnyte, was that there's a lot that has to happen before that stuff makes any sense. You have to bring all your data together first, and you can do that through Egnyte. You can do that through other tools, but you need to make sure your data is not siloed and inaccessible to each other if you want to have a full and complete data set to be able to draw historical conclusions from, things like that. And then you need to clean it up. And there's a specific connotation to cleaning when it comes to AI, but it turns out that we have a really good foundation for that, which had really not sort of thought about when I first was looking at this company. And it goes back a long way. So I could give you a little bit of the history, but 2013, we were using machine learning and natural language processing to identify sensitive data. So identifying financial data exposed in documents, personally identifiable information 10 plus years ago, right? Then it got smarter as deep learning and stuff started to happen, and behavioral detection became a thing. A user downloads 500 files, maybe they're going to leave the company, but that's an unusual behavior. Let's trigger a flag to an admin, or an external, actor maybe isn't real or is doing something that's not a normal way of accessing the data. So that's something that's an odd behavior. Data exposure protection, the things we talked about earlier, redundant, obsolete, trivial information detection, automating retention, archive, and deletion. Those are all became sort of AI powered. Access to the data. This is a very different idea, but just finding the quickest path to the cloud, to the master, because in Egnyte's case, the cloud is the master. So if you might have hybrid devices like virtual machines, accelerators, essentially for large offices, things like that. But if those are clogged, AI would figure out what is the quickest way to get you to your information, no matter where you are. And then beyond the classification of data, beginning to identify documents. So, this document is from this party to this party asking for something related to this project, must be an RFI. Being able to, that's starting around 2019, this kind of behavioral this kind of document recognition capability. And then every customer of Egnyte gets a or their own AI tenant. The data never leaves their domain. There's no checkbox to share it with the world. It's, it's a private, we say private, purposeful. Anyway, so this is a delivered trained based on a lot of years of work, but we have a self-training tool, trainable classifier, so someone can further train on their own documentation stuff to just improve accuracy quickly. And then more recently, we've started to move towards the kinds of AI you engage with, right? The chatbots, knowledge bases, document summaries, and even things like image recognition. So there's a door in this image. This image was taken at this location. So it's a door on this project. It should go in that folder, and this person should be notified there was a random photo out there of a door for this project, right? That kind of stuff is coming along, and all of these things up to about where we get to the AEC specific kind of capabilities. All of that is part of this underlying layer of just cleaning your stuff up, right? And again, this whole Egnyte is a very specific, because of the cybersecurity focus, very specific, private, purposeful, and practical kind of approach to AI, as we declare it, I guess. But it seems like that is a really good place to start. It's, as I say often, it's the thing that gets us to the thing. It's the thing the AI you probably didn't think about,
Enabler.
that gets you to the AI that you're obsessed with, right?
Right. Yeah, it's not the sexy visual, or it's the enabler, right?
Like the critical missing step, really, in a lot of, like, we're doing cart in front of the horse here in terms of AI.
Maybe it'd be interesting to hear you talk about, after you landed at Egnyte, what were the first things that you saw with your AC hat on and experience that said, this is a great platform, but maybe we could do these kinds of things? Or what were the things that you identified to help make Egnyte a more purposeful product for the AC industry?
Yeah, well, there's constant development. I mean, Egnyte has a pretty agile product team, and I appreciate that. But there are often explorations into features that are fairly specific, or that I feel have been solved, by some other point product. So maybe we should just partner with them or buy them, or, something. Well, I don't know that we necessarily need to solve the same problems as the industry giants, or as, very dedicated niche tools. But when I see certain things, and of course I'm, biased, having come from Autodesk, but when I see the way, for example, the way Revit Cloud work sharing works, okay, I'm like, well, there are answers. We have specific answers to how to do that with Egnyte. There are other competitors out there who have, been known for years that kind of have a solution. But when I look at them, I think these are all like appliance heavy, IT driven things, and that you just log in and work from, it's tethered cell phone anywhere in the world. Maybe we don't need to build that, right? And that's there've been efforts to build that internally. I said, no, maybe best in class integration with Autodesk Construction Cloud makes a lot more sense than trying to do point features to replace certain pieces of that workflow, and we've been moving in that direction. It's something we test with customers. We have both a customer advisory board and AEC that is kind of a CIO level, or at least C-suite level, that advises us on, Egnyte sort of strategic direction, as well as something that I helped put together called our technical advisory board. I felt that when I arrived, we had a lot of IT relationships, which makes a ton of sense when you based on everything we just talked about. But we didn't have the relationships I wanted with design technology leaders and construction technology leaders that understand deeply what the end users are going through. And I thought that was a critical missing piece to inform the product team on what they really need in their toolbox, right? So we now have a board of customers from 5 to 25,000 plus employee companies that are advising us, in a technical way and giving direct feedback to our product team. So I feel like we're, to answer your question, there are still specific areas where we think we can, in our lane, we can enhance the industry. And then there are other places where it's like, let's just solve the problem of getting data where it needs to be for, a specific purpose at a specific time. And that might involve just building best-in-class integrations to do it, as opposed to trying to solve it ourselves.
Is Windows File Explorer still the primary interface to the data? Like once somebody has that in place, that's still for the end users. Is that still the main place that you're going to?
Yeah. So myself, I use a MacBook for work here. It's the first time I've always had a MacBook at home, but first time I've used one professionally. And I find, because I'm not as much of a fan of Finder as I am of Windows Explorer, that I tend to use the web interface in Chrome equally, or at least as much, if not more. But for the vast majority of users, and maybe this is one of our strengths too, our desktop app is so well integrated that you just don't know. Like there are many stories of customers implementing Egnyte over a weekend, and the users come in and they just match the drive letters. Right. So they don't know the difference until they right click and see all these cloud options that they didn't have before. But otherwise they're like, hey, what'd you do? This is working fast, and it's well, there's no server in a building anymore, or there's, we got rid of all this other stuff. And so I think the desktop app is used very heavily. But the web interface actually does contain more capability. And then I hear more stories than I would expect, because for me, I haven't, maybe because of just, my day job's a little unique here, but I haven't used the mobile app a ton, but I hear a ton of stories about it because of the fact that it's, as I'm walking through an airport, somebody's asking me for, this is me repeating secondhand, but somebody's asked me for this point cloud. So I just, shared it with them quick from the mobile app. And it's like, okay, cool. That's something, but I guess the desktop app, maybe the mobile app, and then the web.
Yeah,
the web UI is the most capable. There's actually, admin consoles, a dashboard, all this stuff, but maybe it's just not needed by end users.
We at AVAIL, we built our demo environment is all Egnyte on the back end. So Evan, when we started building the last, now been probably a year and a half ago or something, the latest kind of demo version, there's a lot of content that we put in to do that. So we actually standardize that. And part of that strategy was not only us internally, but any partner that wanted to then access the same demo, we could give them permission to see and share. But so my interaction, right, primarily with the platform from that standpoint, Aaron, has been we just use the desktop connector, right? And it just shows up like a drive letter.
But not desktop connector.
Not that. Yeah.
All right, sorry, just get Autodesk. Anyway, so yeah, we do have certain features, like if like a customer that's generating AI imagery, drops that stuff into Egnyte, and they discovered that the web UI is a photo gallery naturally secured the way Egnyte secures things. And it's like, oh, we don't have to build that. That's great. We can share stuff as needed. We can do workflows like, markups and comments on them. Cool, right? That's the desktop app's more limited in terms, because it's, working within Windows Explorer, but we are working to build some of those features, the bin file preview and other things like that, build those in as much as possible into the desktop app experience, just so that the users get there without having to open the browser.
Makes sense. What do you see? What's kind of coming around the corner, or what have you got glimpses of, or hear the team internally talking about as far as anything? Obviously, you can only talk about things that you're allowed to talk about, but what are the exciting things that you think we're going to see here in the next couple of years?
Oh, years. Okay. Wow.
Well, that's usually my window is like, a year, you all know a year goes by like that. It's like, so what's in the next 18, 24 months that you think will be reality?
Yeah. So the first thing, AEC wise, the first thing that I can speak to is what we announced at Autodesk University, which is that we're building a direct integration. We currently integrate through Workato, through ACC Connect. And that's fine for, certain use cases, but we have deeper direct integrations with other vendors. And so we're looking to achieve the same kind of near real time synchronous capability with Autodesk Construction Cloud, which would be unique. in the industry. As a preview to that, or almost as a freebie that we get with that, just by connecting to the Autodesk Construction Cloud API, we'll be able to govern data in Autodesk Construction Cloud. Now, a lot of end users probably don't care about that, but we're getting a lot of requests from sort of technology management side of things to get that in their hands as quickly as possible after having teased that. Because if you think about it, if I were to ask you to go to ACC and give me a total amount of storage that you have there and show me where it's at, you can't. Like, you don't even know where your content is or how much of it is, because it's free and it's unlimited, right? So, but you don't know what you have sitting out there. You can't without asking on it. But you also don't have insight into what might be sensitive, what might meet or not meet compliance protocols, ethical data use standards, et cetera. You don't have any of that. And we can turn that on now. We can just add Autodesk as a content source just by virtue of starting to do work with their API, because all of the actual functionalities on the Egnyte side. And so it's pretty neat to see ACC then all of a sudden revealed with all the places where you're stored. Well, that's a big project. All of this information, being able to see all the permissions by user, by role, by folder structure, by, just kind of monitoring it, not controlling it, but just monitoring it. And then especially to be able to see the AI start to go in and classify, oh, this has got a security risk score of 7. What's that mean on this one? And this is showing that it's not meeting GDPR, or there's information that's relevant to GDPR exposed in that, whatever policies I have turned on are starting to flag automatically by tagging every document that's sitting in ACC. And so that's pretty cool. I mean, I heard Autodesk mention governance for the first time on main stage this year, but nobody has offered that, including Autodesk, before. And so that's pretty cool, especially if you're trying to, achieve certain security standards across projects, or if you're wanting to do this holistically across your company. And up till now, ACC has just been the other place where your data sits.
It makes me think, Aaron, do you all have the ability to know when a file has been not just accessed by a person, but do you know, like, when an application accesses that file, can you identify what accessed it? I'm thinking about, the idea that as this information is sitting out there, especially in cloud, somebody else's cloud, do you know if it's being accessed by not only you, but maybe the host, or, what's touching your data? Do you all have insights into that? I hadn't really thought about it that way, but
that piece is beyond my pay grade. I need to find that out.
That'd be an interesting thing to know, right? Because, there's a lot of things.
We do know who, when, those kinds of things, but I like where you're going with that.
Well, I think with the, a lot of the AI conversation, as we've been doing work in that front, I've been learning, I'm trying to make sure that I don't use the word train, because, like, in the stuff that we're doing, we're not training anything new on people's data. You touch it, you do some things, but you're not ingesting it and using it to train some new model. So there's just a lot of new language that everybody's having to learn and to think about. And it just seems that one of the big unknowns now is, like, okay, here's this data that's sitting here. Who's touching it? What's happening to it? Do I have control of my own, even within the firm, you can, this is even outside actors. It's like inside of a large firm. It's like, are there teams of people over here doing things with this that we don't know or understand? It'd be really interesting to not think about it I guess you have to authenticate. Just trying to think, I'll have to think about that some more. Like, how can you know if an application has access to that data? Or
yeah, well, okay. So there's a few things in there. Like, one is, if anything's ever changed, we would know that. Like, if there's any change made, but if something's just referencing it
or read it,
if it's in Egnyte, that would be permissions controlled. So we would know if anything's accessing it. In ACC, I don't know that we would, because, that could be some other third-party integration that's coming in from another angle. That's a good to explore for you. But yeah, it's like, how deep do you go? Like, in terms of these things, I think I think it's super appealing, the data governance aspect, only because that's been kind of a relatively unknown place before, right? Sure, we work on projects there all the time, but we don't have the view of that we would have of our own, file server or SharePoint site or whatever it might be that we organize our data on. And so we're changing that. And then what'll follow that is direct sync. So API driven sync. So you'll still have the ACC Connect, Workato based integration. Our connector there is not going away, but if someone needs something that's more near real time, or, personally, I want to get to the point where it's not about copying and syncing files back and forth, but rather, simply extracting metadata on both sides and doing smart things with it. Right. And I don't care where it's stored, because I think that's where things go when we get beyond, documents down the road. But in the interim, just having a direct sync makes it easy. Any user is not IT driven anymore, or, design technology leader driven anymore, but rather any user can right click and choose to start a sync with the whole project or a specific folder or subfolders, and so becomes more self-serve in terms of making integrations come online.
I guess, go ahead, Em.
I'm curious about this. I'm going to ramble for a minute, and I'm going to see if you can make sense of this, because when I was leading digital practice in a firm, there's a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit that I think leadership doesn't recognize is actually taking a huge amount of time. And I can imagine, what falls into that list is like email, right? Things that, like, nobody wants to actually acknowledge how much time they spend in email not working, right? We call it work, but it's totally unproductive work because everybody's buried in this email. I imagine files and like sharing and just organizing or ignoring, like as the case may be, has a huge cost to the business. And I'm just curious if there's any metrics or stats that you could share that kind of give us a sense of the true cost of what it's like to deal with all this data. Because again, I think this is one of those things where if leadership in a firm actually recognized that, they would be like, oh my God, we need to change what we're doing. And there are tools that help automate the doingness of this stuff to make our bottom line more profitable. Like, it's like spam filtering as an example, right? It's like you don't even realize how much time and money that's actually saving you if it's done right? As a really easy example. And yet we're still buried under email and still spending our entire day in email in an AEC office, right? So, I mean, if you told a leader, like, your people aren't actually working, they're just processing email. That is not what people are getting paid to do. They just have to do that too, right? I imagine it's a very similar story with files and content and all of these things, but do you have metrics or stats around that kind of thing and what you can actually help companies save or apply to their bottom line?
So I wish I had it in number form. I think the problem with that is that, and some firms will nod their heads when I say this, and others will be mad at me and not want me to come back, but say we're really good at looking at something new and talking about ROI and cost on the new thing, unless it requires that we look at how badly we're doing things right now, because we're terrible at assessing how much time we waste. It's just,
well, it's hard to measure.
Reality. Well, it is, but it's worthwhile if you want to justify the cost of this new thing. Anyway, so as examples, I'll give you a few examples. One is just sharing. You mentioned sharing. If I'm using something like a SharePoint, I mean, even if I'm able to share externally, which I might not be able to, which then results in shadow IT coming, folks finding any mechanism whatsoever they can find to share, which is a disaster. But even if they do have the ability to make it happen, it's usually go to your administrator, ask them to enable those permissions on that. It's just a time suck for the IT side or, somebody in the leadership side every time that needs to happen. So that's so by removing that, by making it possible in a secure way for any user to self-serve share, we have quotes and webinars and on, on case studies where it's like, hey, we can do strategic IT projects now because we're not spending a person's entire 40-hour week just answering requests from the users. That's one example. Another example, computational design leader that is using Python scripting across a practice. And in that practice, in the past, every user had probably a different version of, or an unknown version of Python on their local machines. And then because of all the dependencies, all of the reference scripts that they would use, they had a central like family library of, of these scripts, but users would download them to their machines and, massage things. And so trying to maintain some kind of corporate standard was practically a full-time job. Now it's because it's, one global office and one letter drive, everything's actually just stored on the drive. All users link to the same thing. So when the administrator needs to make a change, he makes that change once globally. And now it's been updated on every user's machine without him ever having to check or do anything. So that just removes all of that garbage. I talked about another example a minute ago. Like there are places like this idea of, enabling a connection instead of having to enable a new Workato recipe or copy the templated recipe over to a new project and set that up. I mean, even if you're fast at it, there's 15 minutes per project that you're not having to waste. And some of our customers are setting up 100 or 200 projects a week. So if you're trying to do that on that side of things, and meanwhile, you're also over here in Vantage Point setting up a project, and then you got to set up folders and permissions in something like Nuforma and Egnyte and ACC. Even if you're fast at it, that's 45 minutes per job and you got 100 to 200 of those a week. Yeah. You do the math, right? So it's,
right.
We have full open APIs, and our professional services team has set up, it's just as an example, set up Vantage Point to Egnyte connectors before. And now the AECC permissions API, as I understand it, is baked. So there would be the potential for us to, for example, just make it possible to set up a project in one place and have that, all of the permissions and folder structure, everything else just populate across these different platforms. Our professional services team was playing around and came to us a few weeks ago, a small group of us, and said, hey, we could just make this like a product feature as opposed to doing this bespoke on demand. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Just please do that whenever you can work it in, because those kinds of things are eating away at productive time.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for saying a little bit about that, because this is one of those things where, again, like people just aren't even thinking about it in that way. And I think if they did, they would be shocked at what's actually happening out there. Could you also just take a moment to talk about risk when it comes to, every architecture firm out there, medium to large for sure, has a risk department, right? They're doing some kind of risk management when it comes to files. Obviously, there's like the email and communication side, but sharing files, and like the different versions and how far back, and just talk about kind of the current state of the industry when it comes to what's going on with risk management and file storage that's either on-prem or in the cloud, and kind of what the latest information is on that.
Yeah, I think one of the positive changes that's happened over the last few years, and I'm not sure if it was accelerated by the pandemic and just sort of the strong, move to the cloud that was already happening, but just the acceptance of it, I guess, broadly. But something along the way changed such that now customers will talk more about the incident. It's not an if, but oh yeah, we had this thing happen when, kind of situation. And I think that openness to begin to talk about that makes risk more of a acceptable term. Something contractors are always, like their entire business is risk. They were always open about these things, but on the design side, where technology was traditionally a necessary evil, like there's been a slower acceptance to open up and talk about risk and talk about data as it relates to that risk. So I would say that now we're in a place where we can have that conversation and it's meaningful, where it might have been hard before. And also, I often talk about this artificial separation between design technology and IT. Like, you're using the same data, so for what it's worth, you all should be talking to each other. But that's something that's still a little bit problematic in firms. But as we move into a place of like the one global office concept, however that gets done, there is a risk if you don't do that well that you'll end up with a lot of silos of data, and or sprawl. Like, you just don't even know where your data is. Um, And, you could go further, like you could say, okay, well, we can also collaborate, not just across, geography, not just the one global office for my firm, but also, of course, collaboration with across domains. So external thing, and which results in potentially a lot of tools talking to each other across companies and across geographies. There's a risk of that getting out of control. And it's hard. It's hard because who really owns that data? It can be hard to define. It's fuzzy. It's hard to define. Well, we're in a collaborative state. Therefore, at this point in time, we sort of both own this data and we're both responsible for its protection. But at some point, and we're both using it for some agreed upon purpose, but at some point that will change. And so understanding who has access, why, for how long, and what purpose is really hard. That's not something that we can do well manually. So it's better to sort of blanket that under something that is governed if we can, because it's really hard to maintain control over sharing. And another risk that kind of goes back to the AI side of things is we want to turn this pile of data, into information that can become actionable knowledge. We want to make sense and then, sort of elevate the value of that data. But if we're not thoughtful about that, again, if you have to check a box to share your data with the world to start looking at your data with something, maybe you need to revisit that decision, because you could unintentionally expose data, which is then not meeting compliance or ethical data use standards or whatever, even if it's unintentional. And then can you trust it? Is the data source that you're using and the way you're organizing it introducing a possible falsehood? There's a risk that, as we say, the veracity of the data is not maintained, that we suddenly have errors introduced. And then therefore all of the things we're generating from that data could be flawed. So there are a number of places where you could encounter risk.
Complexity is getting more complex.
Yeah. I mean,
more things to think about all the
bleak
time.
picture, because there's all these amazing capabilities we get, right? We can do things we couldn't do before, but we have to be smart about how we do them.
Yeah.
All right. I've got my last question is, see the guitar back there. What are you going to play a tune for us? What do you pick on the guitar?
You don't
I
want
was
that
going to ask
happen,
what that
but-
is too.
What do you
For
like?
years and years, I was in a praise band back in college, but for years, but I always played, it's a Strat, but I always played it like it was an acoustic guitar more than I did anything else. But yeah, I need to clean that off a little bit. It has been tuned recently, but I haven't learned anything new in quite a while.
I learned a Tyler Childers song last night on my Gibson. I usually sit on the couch with a Gibson that I have, and it's a nice enough, it's acoustic enough that you don't have to amplify it, and it's
That's right. Yeah,
Is it a hollow body?
no, it's just
what do you got there,
just a
Randall?
solid body, or I forgot what they call them now. They actually hollow it. They make it very lightweight, but it is a solid body.
Chambered. Yeah.
But I treated myself last year to a birthday. That was my birthday present to myself. Was a nice Gibson.
Nice.
I've
Very
seen that
cool.
wreck of guitars. I'm envious. I think
A lot of fun.
Awesome. Speaking of guitars, I'll throw, I just picked up a guitar that my dad had given to or loaned to his cousin this morning, actually, and it's a 1961 Gibson ES335, which is a hollow body Gibson, and it's pretty sweet. I just played it right before podcasting with you guys.
serious
So,
guitar game.
guitars all around.
Yeah,
here.
I'm not very good. I'm self-taught, and much to my wife's chagrin, I'm sure. It's like yesterday I got home and I was like, I've had this Tyler Childers song in my head all day. I'm enough now to where I can go I could learn to play that if I want to. So I get the guitar up, and then really, it's all like this, the muscle memory. So it's over and over and over and over, much to her chagrin, sitting at the other end of the couch, I'm sure. It's
Yes. Yeah. One more time?
now
Really?
it's
One
just
more time?
all of us doing it over and over and over and over and over.
So when I was young, I always
This is
played saxophone, and I would even today, if I picked one up, I'd be able to play it because I played
Nice.
that much better. But but you can't sing while you're playing a saxophone. I mean, you can only sing with the instrument. So I, still
Oh,
guitar.
no, don't try to.
This is the content people show up for right here,
right.
guys.
Maybe there's something about creative arts. I don't know.
No, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we had actually, there was a bunch of people, a bunch of us got together for breakfast at AU, and there was a bunch of people. We started talking about music. Scott Davis plays guitar, and all I was talking about what we do. That's more fun to talk about than the than Revit.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, Aaron, thanks for coming on and sharing some of this. Like I said, it's been that's just thank you. Everybody you all have working on your team, I've just loved interacting with. So you all have been building just a great team, and it's nice to see a company like Egnyte invest in the vertical, right? In saying, okay, we're gonna go hire some really good people in this industry that know what they're talking about. So kudos to you all on the team, and
I didn't go too far out. I appreciate all of that. Thank you. I didn't go too far out, but this year it feels like we've been found. I mean, we've had 1.25 AEC companies per day coming on to Egnyte. It's interesting to be in a nearly 20-year-old company where it feels like startup level growth, and the conversations are fun as a result, because you have this really good platform. It's just, people are just discovering it. And so for me, it's been unique. I mean, I was at a company that's an obvious industry leader at Autodesk. So the name, you could say the badge gets you in the door, right? Just because you're so well known. And here it's just beginning that journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks to you guys have been supportive of Confluence. Like I said, you've attended 3 of the events. I'll plug right now. We're planning a 1-day event in San Francisco.
What's that date?
Yeah, well, I don't have the date. I did have a date, but it might be changing. It's going to be in April. That's our target.
Okay.
But we're planning that right now. So if anybody that's listening is either in the Bay Area, watch out for that. And then obviously some people come in for it. But yeah, we're looking forward to putting that together. So
Cool.
great. Well, thanks for joining us, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
All right.